Hello and welcome back to the Indian Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Raj Balkaran. More importantly, for a special issue of the Indian Wisdom Podcast, I have an interview with a special guest indeed, Dr. Alisa Lozhkina, who is a very well-known in her niche art historian and curator and artist in her own right. More to the point of our podcast, she has done something unprecedented. She has translated the Sanskrit text about the glories of the goddess, the Devī Māhātmya, into Ukrainian for the first time in the history of our world. Alyssa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Raj. It's nice to see you.
So it must feel good to have this monumental achievement out into the world, but you have to tell us the backstory. How did you get this idea? How did this come about for you?
It was very unexpected because I'm an art historian, an art curator, artist. So my field of expertise is rather far from Sanskrit or ancient India. I mean, I was curious about Indian culture when I was a teenager, but then I kind of realized that you had to either dedicate a lifetime to just study it, or you'll end up on some middle ground, which I wasn't like really satisfied with when you kind of have some ideas from India, but then you apply it in your very weird way in your life. So I just decided to stay away from it. But life had some scenarios for me. So because in 2019, I married to a guy. We live in Los Gatos in California, but he's from Kerala in India. And when the pandemic hit, my life was basically like very interrupted because I just moved to the United States. My career was very interrupted. Everything was like disturbed. So I decided that I might as well learn a little bit about his culture because I was very anxious about meeting his parents and Indian parents. It's like a special type of family. So I wanted to somehow integrate and I wanted to achieve some sort of sense of belonging to this absolutely new universe. So I Googled and I found Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. The School of Indian Wisdom wasn't there yet. Otherwise, I would definitely have joined that. But there was this thing, and I started just taking courses in Sanskrit and different spheres, all kinds of things, philosophy. Oxford Center is rich in that kind of content. So, and at one of the courses, I think it was Puranas, actually, Dr. Raj Balkaran was mentoring that course at that point, and I was really, really mind blown by the way you were presenting Indian culture, by the way you were teaching, and by the mere fact that you had Zoom calls and Zoom meetings, unlike all other courses that operated only in the group chat, which was like kind of like boring. So that in the situation of pandemic gave me like a much deeper connection. And yeah, and that's how it started. I don't know, and it became a habit. I mean, it's just like I have these rituals that I like to to have in my life. So for me, studying something about India became one of my rituals. So I kind of like accumulated some amount of knowledge, and I'm the type of person I don't like just the knowledge to be there in my brain and not used because I don't believe in such knowledge. So at some point I started thinking, okay, that's great that I learned so much about Indian culture. My mother-in-law was mind blown. I was like accepted as almost as a authority on Indian everything in my family. They were absolutely mind blown by my level of expertise. So sometimes even some of relatives would come to me and ask, Alisa, what is written there in the Upanishads? And it's like I'm like, okay. probably it's good that I took those courses. So yeah, so I had that, but at the same time, I didn't know how to apply it. And then the war started in Ukraine, and I was really heartbroken, and I felt very useless because it was like a huge catastrophe for all of us, and I was far away. And I remember that there was one. It was in October, and it was Navaratri, and Raj Balkaran sent an email saying that Happy Navaratri, and with some parts of text from Devī Māhātmya. And then it suddenly I had a revelation. I was like, oh my God. This is the text that is so relevant to my life, to the life of the people in my country right now. This is exactly what they need. And I Googled immediately. There was no Ukrainian translation. I was like, oh my God, this is how I can probably do something, in spite of the fact that my Sanskrit is super basic, but at the same time, like it's the desires that drives us. And that was one of the, and I was like, okay, this will be a good way for me even to learn more about this text and to learn more of Sanskrit the way. So thanks God, there are like very good books by academic scholars on this text, which was quite instrumental. Dr. Raj Balkaran authored a couple of books and interesting articles on the topic. And so I was very blessed to have you as my mentor and to have you as my consultant and to have you as an author of the foreword to the book. And now I am really happy that it took me 2 years, to be honest. I didn't plan it to be so long, but yeah, now we have Ukrainian Devī Māhātmya. It was checked and how to say it, like read by a Ukrainian Sanskritologist, because I was very worried for, not to do something that would be completely out of touch with reality. So I kind of think that it's maybe it's not perfect, but I am satisfied with our results. And I also made illustrations for the book. Yeah, that's my weakness. I love drawing.
That's beautiful. I mean, there's so many threads there. The illustrations are incredible, actually. I sent out a note about the book, and really, I have a couple of my one-on-one clients who are artists, and they checked it out, and they're in love. They don't speak a word of Ukrainian, but it was worth it just for the illustrations. So regarding the backstory, that's rich. That's rich. And now, the cat's out of the bag that you studied with me at the OCHS. For those listening, I tutor courses at the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, and I've been doing that since about 2020, I believe, is when I began that. And I love it. And really, one of the hallmarks of my teaching career has been adult education or continuing studies. And it's, I quite love teaching undergrads. I think I've had about 7 or 8 contracts to teach undergrads over the years. And that's beautiful because they're at a very different phase in life and they have sort of different sorts of questions and all that. But imagine a world where people show up to learn and don't care what mommy and daddy think and aren't looking for degree training. They're just looking for knowledge expansion. That's continuing studies. And that's why I love the OCHS. And at the Indian Wisdom School, we do more, I think of it as hybrid education, where there's academic content as well as practitioner content sort of commingled. But the OCHS, while they're practitioner friendly, it's more sort of academic. And I just came in there, and I've always had live calls for online education. So I started these Zoom calls. They never existed at the OCHS. I thought I'm going to have these Zoom calls once a week. And, these days I don't quite have the bandwidth for it, but it was incredible. People like you would pop on the call, and it really helped me understand how special the students are there and the very specific frequency of that platform. And I quite enjoy that. I can't believe it's been a good 3 or 4 years since we've had those calls. And you never know. As a teacher, you have no idea. You sprinkle seeds and you don't know. We don't know. I mean, you yourself are a force in your own field. You write an article, you have a conversation. You yourself, I'm sure, have mentored people in your niche, and who knows where it'll go. But it felt so, for lack of a better word, ordained, like in the language of sort of Indic thought. It felt like prarabdha, like something that was intended to be ripened in this life. It just felt like such a natural fit that I think an interesting way to think of it is that this text has agency, and this text demanded to be uttered in Ukrainian, and we were just instruments of that. Of course, you
Absolutely,
much more so.
absolutely. I mean, I remember first time to be honest, I didn't read that text. I listened to an audiobook in English during the pandemic. I think because you mentioned during one of, first of all, you always mentioned that you wrote a lot about this text, and I got curious. And also, you mentioned that it was like mentioning epidemics. And that in Falashruti, it was mentioning that like it can help in the times of epidemics and times of
Disease. Mm.
turmoils, disease, some all kinds of things. I didn't understand much at that point, and I was like, okay, maybe this is a good text to listen to now during Corona. And I was mind blown, of course, but then it just resurfaced in the times of the war, and it was the first time when I actually read it with my eyes, not with my ears. So, but at the same time, I'm happy that first time I was exposed to this text, it was when by hearing it, but by listening to it, because it's more authentic and it's more probably rooted in the Indian culture. And this is how millions and millions of people have been perceiving this text for thousands of years, at least
Yeah.
1,000 and a half.
Sure, at least 15. I mean, there are various arguments whether it's third century CE or as late as eighth century CE, depending on whether you buy which scholar's argument. Having said that, let's just say approximately 15 centuries ish. But certainly, we can deduce or surmise that people didn't wake up 1,500 years ago in ancient India, which had no shortage of things to worship, and be like, "Hey, let's create a divine mommy because we need one of those." I highly doubt that was an evolute of Brahmanical patriarchal culture. I mean,
No.
they've probably been worshiping some sort of representation of fecundity and fertility, some sort of great mother, figure at the autumnal festival, naturally around the equinoxes. They've probably been doing that for millennia, I imagine. One would imagine this stretches very far
Absolutely.
back. Yeah.
Absolutely. When you start
Um,
like working with this text, you understand that it's basically a patchwork of ideas. It is also a very nice action, philosophical action, where like this mere idea of Shakti becomes like this embodied figure who fights all those demons. But at the same time, it's a patchwork because it has all those threads which are interconnected, and it's just made into one story. But you can see that there are all those ideas that are brought to the scene just to maybe to justify the worship of the divine feminine or something like that. You can see that the root of it is probably very old, but the whole decorum, I mean, intellectual decorum, is quite rooted in the culture of the myths, like I don't know, first millennium.
yes, and I think that's part of the brilliance of the text is that there's probably an ancient, thriving, grassroots, if you will, a tradition on the ground. And yet, what do? They decide to give her a Sanskrit text. It would be akin to a pagan practice being sort of sanctified with a Latin text in medieval Europe. Like, let's give this tradition a
Absolutely.
Latin text and canonize it somehow. But the myth makers, whether they were artists or divinely inspired or who knows, covert tantrikas, although most scholars would say that's anachronistic, although I see the hand of Tantra in the text without question. I think it's deeply encoded in the text. Whoever these authors or rishis or whomever were, they were brilliant because they strategically leveraged everything they could from Indic tradition to that point. They leveraged all Vedic feminine faces, whether it's
Absolutely.
Prithvi, whether it's Vash, the goddess of speech, Ushas, the goddess of the dawn. And on top of that, if that wasn't enough, they took all of these philosophical Upanishadic ideas and said, you know what? That thing you call Maya, delusion, guess what? Without delusion, delusion is power. It gives
Yeah.
you the power to work out your individual karma, thinking you're separate from everybody else. That
Yeah.
delusion you're calling pejorative, that's the Holy Mother. You know that thing called prakriti, matter, mother and matter, how we have the same root in Latin. That thing that you want to get rid of, by the way, that's the Holy Mother. This thing, this world that you think of as a trap, well, it may be a trap, but it's a divine trap, and it's alive, and it's the Holy Mother. So brilliant marketing campaign.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and surprisingly feministic in a societies that wasn't known for its like, high.
The patriarchy. I saw the entire ancient
Of
world,
course.
as far as we know, other than maybe tiny pockets, was patriarchal. And this is what I find shocking, that this tradition, it was so robust that culture decided to fold it in and keep it alive, because it doesn't come out of Indo-European myth. It doesn't come. This is an ancient idea that the divine is feminine. And I think we have a peephole into maybe a once much more prevalent idea that pervaded the globe, where the idea of a divine mother may not have been just. It probably was a very popular idea, culture to culture.
I shared with you this privately, but for me, one of the biggest surprises when I was working already maybe for a year and a half on this text was when I read a translation of a Shumeric text, which was made by the scholar named Sophus Helle. I think he's from Denmark. And he first translated Gilgamesh, and it's my favorite book on earth. So that's how I got, into this thing. And then I got his second book, which is a translation of the hymns of Enheduanna, the priestess, high priestess of the city of Ur, who lived in the 23rd century before Christ, which is like what, almost 3,000 years before Devī Māhātmya. And the vocabulary, the language, the energy of the texts, like where this Enheduanna worships Inanna, another form of divine feminine energy, is so similar to Devī Māhātmya and the hymns, especially the hymns praising the feminine divine, that I was really mind blown. I couldn't comprehend it for a while. I was trying to look for certain, like, of course, we can interpret it in different ways. We can say that, okay, there was some transfer of ideas because, of course, that whole region was very entangled and there were a lot of like places of cultural interaction and communication in the course of history between the general Indic world and the general Mesopotamia. But also we can say that this can be just reflecting the similarities in the experiences of humans all over the world. So I'm still mind blown. I'm still very curious about this topic. I'm very inspired now by Inanna because it feels now like the sister of our Devi. And Inanna
Yes.
is a very powerful, how to say it, figure in the history of human culture, which gave an impetus for many other like understandings of feminine divine in other cultures. So it's like it's a serious topic which is really worth researching one day.
Well, it's fascinating. I did a series at the University of Toronto's School of Continuing Studies. I was there before I started the OCHS. This series was, I think, or might have been alongside it in some private fora, from 2010 to about 2015. It was called Faces of Fertility. And I was fascinated that in all of the ancient Near Eastern world, there was a water goddess that was related to Venus, whose namesake is the most popular water goddess, the Roman name of Aphrodite, arising from the sea foam. All of the ancient world have a feminine face representing the waters with similar mythologies. So yes, the question of whether there was the cultural exchange of ideas, or whether it was sort of instinctive to personify the feminine as water because we come from the womb. I mean, who knows? But it utterly fascinated me. And above and beyond that, the idea that we have this very conscious revolution in Abrahamic thought from a people of the desert who have a fire god who pushes the water aside, figuratively and literally. And this revolution really is a scaffolding of Western civilization, whether people are devout or they're agnostic or they're spiritual, not religious. This is sort of the backdrop of Western civilization, this desert narrative. And so I find it fascinating to fold back in ideas from the ancient Near East, ideas from the Devī Māhātmya, And in a way, perhaps it brings balance to our psyche, because certainly it takes two to tango. So, and in certain cases, at least on a domestic level, Indian families or families in general can be more matriarchies than patriarchies. And you've done this rare thing, not translating the Devī Māhātmya to Ukrainian, but gaining your mother-in-law's approval, gaining your Indian mother-in-law's approval. So you're well
I think
aware.
the rumor has already reached like the furthest parts of Kerala. So I'm very proud of it. And yes, regarding the parallels, it's also important to think about the fact that like both Inanna and her later like an analog Ishtar, they were associated with the star, with the morning star. And one of the names of the Divine Mother in the Indian culture is also Tara, also a star, which makes me think a lot about all those things. And when I was, reading about the spread of the idea of feminine divine in the whole general region, in the roughly around the time when the text was written, we don't know when it was written, but roughly in that period, I discovered, like as an art historian, I was very pleased because I discovered a lot of artifacts of armed
Armed.
goddesses. Yes, from Khwarezm, which is on the territory of contemporary Uzbekistan. And then for my other research, I was recently reading book by an Arab how to say traveler, like from I think 10th century, Ibn Fadlun, who traveled to Volga, to the tribes who lived in the on the territory of contemporary Russia. And it's very interesting because he traveled through Khwarezm and further north, and he describes how he reaches these lands occupied basically by Turkic tribes already. And one guy sits with him side by side, and he starts speaking about Allah and everything. And the guy asks him very politely, I heard this rumor. Is it true? Is God a woman? So it's like, it's already like, I don't know, thousands and thousands of kilometers north, but the idea was there. Is God a woman? And of course, the Arab travel says, "Oh, I absolutely dismissed all those like fake claims of horses cannot be a woman," but it is there, and it's an original like manuscript. So the ideas were there, and they were probably like circulating in a much wider area, especially before the Abrahamic religions became such a big thing, which kind of stress the masculine nature of God, or rather, we understand it this way because in many books, like I think even Aquinas mentions that the God is not like man or woman; it's like something neutral. but still, this became the dominant idea and probably overshadowed something that we still don't really understand.
To my mind, the most powerful mythologization of the masculine principle itself we see in the Hebrew Bible. It's not just the masculine face of the divine; it's the masculine mode. It's sort of like, here are the rules. I've laid them down. I'll come back later. If you listen, you might get promoted. I'm the CEO. You get a promotion, or you might get a demotion. And it's a very sort of systematic, formulaic universe in a sense. It's sort of an extraordinary left brain mythology. It's not particularly like right brain. I mean, there's wisdom everywhere. It doesn't do well with paradox. It doesn't do well with every mythology has strengths and weaknesses, right? Every work of literature the same. And so it is a profound mythologization of the masculine principle. And to my mind, the Devī Māhātmya, it's not just God with a feminine face, it's a profound mythologization of the feminine principle. It's not hierarchical power, it's communal power, where we come together to manifest her. She achieves our aim, she fulfills our wishes, and she gets out of the way. She restores Indra's throne. Does she ever sit on it? No. I'm good. Call me when you need me. Bye for now.
At the same time, it's a complete revision of the feminine and this like understanding of the feminine. Because whenever I tell someone that, oh, I translated that book about the great goddess, they're like, oh yeah, it's so sweet, so nice, she's so tender. That's what we need in our world right now. I'm like, that's not exactly what she is.
Yeah. How about you read the
Why?
book? Read the book, darling. Read the book.
So yeah, so because there is a stereotypical feminine, which is submissive, which is like nice, tender, loving, and all that thing. Our goddess is loving, but in her very own way. And in a way, she is maybe embracing both roles of a male and a female.
Absolutely. I think it's profound because, it is, if we want to crudely simplify in terms of symbology, the feminine archetypally can be thought of as water, the feminine principle, not just men and women, not just gender roles, not just orientations, not just vocations, but perhaps we all have a feminine principle, which is the power to accommodate and nurture, and that's water. And we all have a masculine principle, the power to assert, right? Which is fire. And she starts off very watery and then she gets very fiery. But the key is she always returns to her, she always returns because her masculine martial mode, it's episodic for a purpose. So her clenched fist is just episodic, but she wakes up with an open palm and she goes to bed with an open palm, and I come in peace, I bless you. But if it's war you want, it's war you'll get. And that
Yeah, she's
reminds me
like this
very much.
lioness. Like she's not like the female in a patriarchal society. She's the lioness. She's a lonely woman protecting her cubs from whatever is there, including maybe her male partner.
Exactly. So I would, I mean, I'm sure we can go on for hours about this. Tell me, in your perspective, what was, you said as soon as you read it, you thought that these were ideas or themes or texts that had to be shared with Ukrainian people. Please say more about that. Say more about the relevance of this. And where I live is ancient Indic ideas, ancient Indic texts, and modern relevance. Like, how can we make sense of these for our lives, whether as practitioners or scholars? So I love the idea that this text has a message for people, particularly people under duress. But I would love your perspective on the connections you saw there.
First of all, I believe that how to say it, ideas have their own life, and they are all alive to certain. It's like artworks. You cannot say that the artwork is outdated. It's just like maybe our perception is like different. But when we start diving into the creative universe, each creative universe is very singular. And once we have the key, once we have the enough understanding of the general culture, we have the ability to revitalize and revive it. And of course, like the text where this divine, feminine, very brutal and aggressive power interferes into the world order, where mundane, regular, small gods, demigods, like failed protecting it, and they failed and they lost their battle to the great demons, and they are basically thrown out of their homes, and they are roaming around the earth as homeless people. I like that part of the of Devī Māhātmya, and of course they suddenly this energy that comes to the fore and saves the situation. Of course, it was very relevant to how I felt and what we needed in 2022 for Ukraine, and we still do need it. A lot of people think that the war is over, but it's not, and I think it's still very relevant for what is happening there right now. And what is important is that like it has this energy that is unprecedented, and it also has like the ambition to state that it is healing. It's not just a regular text that says like, oh, there were like good boys and bad boys somewhere out there, and well, that's what happened to them. No, it's like it's a story that's in the end in the 12th, yes, chapter. It says, okay, listening to my glories will bring you this, and that. And then on top of it, it has all those ritual additions, angas, that stated even more explicitly. Okay, it's magical thinking to a certain extent, but in the times of war, some little amount of magical thinking is not too bad for the people who are in this like very, very tragic circumstances. So I really liked it. Initially I didn't plan to translate the Angas because they seemed so boring to me and so I couldn't like figure out what was there, like why people even composed that kind of stuff. But then I decided that the whole story wouldn't be complete without these things, because that's how it actually functions in the tradition. That's how people have been reading Devī Māhātmya as a separate text apart from the Markandeya Purana for hundreds of years at least. So from the mere respect to the tradition and just to understand why they were doing it that way, I started translating it and I was mind blown, Raj. I don't even know what I like more now, Devī Māhātmya itself or the Angas, because they show such depths of communication with the text. Text becomes visiting the shrine. This shrine, this is like a pop-up shrine of a divine mother that just opens whenever we start reading the Devī Māhātmya. And the whole idea that we first put an armor on ourselves, the kavacha, then we open the door, then we say one special other mantra, and then we say a Vedic hymn, and only then we enter this space of altered consciousness, basically. And on the way out, we also have to do certain things, because it's like visiting a shrine. It's not just reading a text in our modern understanding of this word. So for me, and again, this gives you the sense of protection, the sense that this was something important that happened in your life. Not you just read some another stories or zillions of stories. No, this is like a journey. This is an experience. This is a ritual. And I really loved it. It made me think a lot about the way how we read texts today, how we communicate, the level of depth of our understanding of text. Because of course, those people who composed the Angas, they used to recite this text day by day, every day for decades. For them, it was a completely different creature. And
Yeah.
that was interesting. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to include it. And I thought, okay, maybe for someone who is at war now, it will be a very, healing experience just to read it. And I somehow felt that there was somebody there who needed it. And you know what? I'm sorry for talking that much, but I have to tell it to you, because the publisher of the book is another story. I think it's worth mentioning here, because this is the everyday heroism of scholars. This is something that we have to bring attention of people to. This is the young, relatively young religious scholar who also publishes books on all kinds of unconventional topics, like alchemy in Geoffrey Chaucer's works. This was one of the recent books, like in the war zone, was published, or some grimoire, some magic texts from the 15th century, some religious scholarly stuff, like something about shamanism, all kinds of interesting things, not not so much Christian related, more like history of religions and esotericism in general. So, and he was he's been in the army. He was mobilized, I think last year, in the end of last year, 2023 or something like that. And he is at the battlefield. He is on the front line. And he's still publishing books. He's still doing something. Devī Māhātmya is out. I keep messaging him, like, we discussed the cover of Devī Māhātmya this morning. We discussed, and he was sending me pictures from the Donetsk region, which is the Donbas, the area where the biggest fights are happening right now. And what is more mind-blowing, that he was assigned, because they don't choose the the type of activity that they are going to do in the army. So he's in the battalion that is bringing dead soldiers from the front line and is taking care of their funerals, which is like psychologically terrible thing to do, of course, but he still carries on. He still publishes those books. He has so much interest in Devī Māhātmya. He brought some signal copies of our book to the front line recently, and he's so excited to distribute them among the soldiers. And that's what makes me think, you know, for me, it's not a commercial project. I don't want to have any single penny from it, but this is what makes me think, okay, my 2 years of life are not in vain, because even for this person, I wanted to do it. I want Divine Mother to help him and to somehow to protect all those people who need it there.
Yeah, it's thank you for sharing all of these rich threads of this journey for you. I mean, the Devī Māhātmya is a mythological, it's a narrative text that's part of the Markandeya Purana. I typically translate it loosely as the greatness of the goddess because I like the sort of the I like what that how that feels in English, maybe the glories or the magnanimity, you know, the acts of the goddess. But it also, as I say, moonlights as a liturgical text where it is ritually intoned, particularly at the fall autumnal festival that was more or less a week ago in at the time of us speaking now, where the entire thing is ritually incanted for the summoning of the Shakti, the power, the presence of the Holy Mother. And the idea is that they need their armor. They need the limbs preceding and anteceding the text proper for the ritual intoning and the generation of that spiritual power. Now, whether we think of that spiritual power as ontologically real or symbolically real, you know, I speak now more as a knower of human beings and someone who's had well over 100 clients over the years, formally, and probably close to 1,000 informally. That we have a fundamental capacity as human beings to draw on and connect with a font of strength that is part of us and that is greater than we are at the same time. We've all experienced times of duress where we were able to tap a strength that we did not know we had. And the gentleman of which you speak, I mean, he's probably congenitally by birth a dynamic and able and driven person. But there's no question in my mind that day in and day out to do the work he does and still execute his functions as a publisher, he is drawing on a
Yes.
strength that is greater than his mundane self.
Tries to stay positive and even jokes about it, because recently he messaged me and said, you know, they are sending us to the war zone that is even like more dangerous, like in the heart of the where things are happening, with my friend, and there are two scholars, and he's like, you know, we decided that I'm gonna be Arjuna and he's gonna be Krishna because he knows how to drive, and I don't know how to drive a car, so he's gonna drive a car and that's why he's gonna be a Krishna. And the reason why he mentioned it, because the previous book that he published like months ago was a Ukrainian translation of Bhagavad Gita, which was also very demanded on the front lines, because this is the kind of book that you have to read in such situations, actually.
Yeah, it is interesting that the Bhagavad Gita really not only domesticates philosophy for the householder, but it shows that however elevated or esoteric or abstract this philosophy may seem, its ultimate purpose is hugely practical. Its ultimate purpose is navigating your mundane life in a sensible manner. In a manner, it's really profound. These ideas are profound. Wow, that's really something. What were some of
And
the
can
most
you imagine being on the front line when you are already at war? And this is such a relevant text, because Arjuna says, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. These are my relatives. This is exactly what Ukrainian, like it seems like it's surreal, but Ukrainians are in the same exact situation. My publisher is in the same exact situation, because he cannot even share publicly in social media that he's at war, because half of his family is on the occupied territories and he's like half Russian. And it's like such an entangled and complicated situation. It's Mahabharata basically unfolding in front of our eyes in my motherland. I hate to see it. I hate to admit it, but it is. And of course, for people's there, like when you hear it's like don't think about anything, don't stay selfish, just get rid of all those things in your mind and just go and fight, because this is your karma yoga. Of course, they find some solace in those words because they have no other choice. They're mobilized there. It's not that they are asked to. Some of them do it voluntarily. They go and serve in the army, but some of them it's like just like the government sends you to the front line. So you
Yeah,
kind of
they're
have to
drafted
deal with a lot of emotional trauma and with a lot of issues and questions.
without question. What would you say are some of the most resonant or relevant ideas from the Devī Māhātmya for these situations? Like what sort of so resonates with you about this text, particularly at this time, as you say?
Uh, I think that everything is very relevant. It's just like, let me think. The idea, like this whole episode with, first of all, with Shumha and Nishumha, because the essence of this episode is that, like in this case, the Divine Mother and the goddess, she doesn't come because the Devas ask for her help, unlike in both other episodes, but because these guys decide to abuse their power. They already have everything in this universe. And even the goddess admits this. They stole all the treasures from all the gods and devas in the entire universe. They're super rich. They're super powerful. They're cool. And then they decide, oh, of course, now we need the source of power. We want to have this. And we want to have it, and we want to rape it. We want to have it as our wife, and not like it's not a consensual thing. So they just send the messenger and try to just like get what they are not supposed to take. And then she just rises and she says, no, guys, this is too much, way too much. So in a way, like what is happening in contemporary Russia is very similar. They have everything. They have natural resources, they have cultures, they have a lot of things like that they could use for some other purposes rather than just going and trying to conquer. You know what is interesting? Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, in the tradition which we share, both Russians and Ukrainian, it's called the mother of Russian cities. So in a way, this is like you're asking what is relevant. Everything is relevant. They are trying to conquer the mother because Ukraine is the heart of this Russian territories historically. It's a long story. We don't have time for all this discourse now, but it's the mother. And this is the abuse of the mother. Whatever the geopolitical things, like I don't want to go deep into the rabbit hole, but just between two of us, this is a very brutal crime. That's why I think that this is quite relevant.
Yeah, very, very powerful. I'm so very glad that you felt inspired, that you were called to translate this text, and even more glad that you heeded the call. You heard the call. We're often called in different ways to different things, but do we have the courage to heed the call? Because when we were given a call, it's not straightforward. There's a chasm we need to cross or have a leap of faith to get from where we are to what we're called to do or be or show. And I'm very glad that you heeded the call, because these ideas are profoundly inspirational. But one of the fundamental differences between Indic text and what we think of as text, particularly in our modern times, is that the latter construes text as information. So text messaging, information, right? Text is information. Oh, I know what it says. We're scanning for information. Sort of in the shelf of our mind, we're putting these books or these bits or these bytes or these of information. And Indic thought has always used the currency of transformation, that the ideas should change you. And if these ideas are not changing you, then you are not understanding them or or receiving them in the spirit with which they were crafted, in the spirit with which they were revealed. And so it's heartening that there's now an audience for whom language is not a barrier, who can access the ideas, the motifs of this utterly radical text. I'm not sure why I'm one of the very few people on the planet at the Western Academy who studies this text. This text is a radical text, even in Indic thought, much less against the backdrop of Abrahamic thought. It is utterly radical and fascinating and rich. And I think it is time that I think it's very timely for the Ukrainian people. I keep coming back to episode 2, the central episode where the powers of all the gods unite to manifest the goddess who is more than the sum of their individual selves. And I keep coming back to this image of this is what the citizens of Ukraine are doing, particularly those who are called to the front line. They're coming together and manifesting a force greater than themselves. And what is the ultimate purpose of that force in that episode, and perhaps in the text at large? The restoration of sovereignty, the restoration of self-rule, where one's rule, one's self-regulation, one's self-rule on an individual or on a communal level has been molested, has been encumbered by a bad actor. And I find that so powerful that they are manifesting a force greater than themselves for the restoration of their sovereignty, much akin to the goddess of the Devī Māhātmya.
You are right, absolutely. And I want to support the idea that this text should be like studied more, because even the angas, they are so rich. This is obviously some tantric influence, and the way how they perceive the world, the way the kind of thinking that they unveil is so interesting, and especially that it's related to this big text in the tradition. And for some reason, when I started looking for some academic articles about this particular topic, there's nothing. I mean, Thomas Coburn in his book, he touches upon these issues, but it's not enough. It's not sufficient. But there's so much more there. All those names of the goddess, all those like ideas, all those like the way how this is perceived, like how this even perceived that like there are 8 angas in the text, so 8 limbs, and Durga usually has 8 arms. So it's like it is so visual and it's so rich. It's so interesting. I really think that this should be more research. And yes, thank you so much for your support, and thank you so much for your kindness and for your understanding and for your empathy to Ukrainian people and to me personally. I really appreciate it. I think one of the reasons why I started this project was because first thing when the war started, I remember like in a week or so you messaged me and you said, Alisa, do you need help? We can just go to Zoom and I can try somehow to talk to you. And it was so touching, Raj. It was so valuable that you just reached out and you just asked how I was doing in that situation. And then I felt comfortable just asking you other questions. It might have been a little bit overwhelming, but ideas have consequences.
No, this is the way it is. I mean, even during the pandemic, it was such that, look, I'm not a healthcare worker. I do healing work of different kinds with people. And funnily, I thought, well, I do this New Books Network podcast, and I joked to my friends that my war effort in the pandemic sense is producing this content because people are under lockdown and need content, but also people are going out of their minds, sitting in their studies all day or watching TV or the news, and people need conversation. Colleagues need conversation, and people need content. And so I amped up the production of that podcast to about 4 to 6 a month in April 2020. And strangely enough, the podcast has demanded to be fed, and it's continued since at that pace. And similarly, in terms of what's happening with the world, I'm very much of the opinion that we each have our own cross to bear, and we each have our own duty, and to focus on what we are called to do. Because if we are all being sucked into, for example, American politics or whatever, what world is left we have to do our part to make sure there's a world left post whatever calamity, whatever crisis, whatever nonsense. And that's by focusing on our dharma, our calling, our occupation, our children, our spouses. And so, nevertheless, how can I possibly help in Ukraine? I mean, there's nothing that I can do in that situation. But if there are people in my life who I know who are from that culture or heritage, certainly just a simple call or a message of support. I mean, this is what little that I can do. And this is what's within my control. And the rest is up to powers that are beyond all of us, right?
You are also channeling the energy, and it's like it's very obvious. It's like very anti-scientific to make such statements, but I that's how I perceive you. I mean, I sometimes think that you're the lion of the Divine Mother. But at least like this is such a powerful experience, because when you start like talking about this issue, first of all, you're very knowledgeable from scientific point of view, so you're not making some claims that are just purely, out of touch with
Speculative,
reality.
like the piranhas are a million years old or something.
Something like that. Yeah, it happens a lot in this field. Somehow Indic thought provokes people to, to use their imagination, let's say. But at the same time, you're not doing it in a boring, like, I don't mean to hurt academia, but like academic thought can be deafening. It's like
A
it's the
little
death of
dry at
ideas.
times. It can be
Yeah.
dry at times. Yeah.
It can be too dry most of the times. So in your case, you are somehow like you are bringing it to life. I can understand that this is not something that is somewhere out there in India in the mid first millennium see. It's like it's here and now. This is like this goddess is dancing in front of my eyes. She's unfolding her like, glories and her boons and her powers. That's I think the big effect of you as a teacher, because especially the way you teach in the School of Indian Wisdom. I was lucky to take a couple of courses, and I think that this is like it, you can feel it in every lecture, in every Zoom, that it's like there is some energy there. She's there in this way or another. So you are like, and you feel the energy of your classroom. It's very important. Like somehow you always address, even if I see the recordings of your interaction with people, it's always easy to spot how you feel other people, their like energy, their like anxieties, and you kind of find a way to address their needs. And I think it's important, because we are living the secular world, where we have very little access to that kind of help, in the secular setting.
Yes, I thank you. That's very, very kind of you to note or to say. I think of it in my mind as spiritual nourishment. I think we need to be nourished on a number of levels. And I think obviously we have to nourish our physical bodies and our intellectual ideas for our intellectual bodies, and emotional nourishment is very important. And so is spiritual nourishment. And it's difficult to derive spiritual nourishment without dogma or without superstition or without,
Oh
it's
yeah.
difficult because the baby in the whole baby in bathwater metaphor for religion and religiosity, it really is tricky. And so I think I leverage the ideas and even the practices at times of ancient India to nourish people. But they're at an Indian buffet. They can eat what they'd like, digest what they'd like, whatever they'd like. There's no, this is the only food and you have to eat everything on your plate. It's nothing like that. This is a buffet. You cook for people, eat what they like, they leave when they'd like, and that's that. And I think it's really important to nourish people in a safe way that isn't requiring anything of them intellectually or socially, or there's no hidden fees, there's no catch, there's no BS political nonsense. It's just these are extraordinarily powerful ideas that could change your life.
They
and
are.
and also to your point, yes, without question, perhaps when I started studying Hinduism formally, maybe about 20 years ago, um, perhaps Shakti would have been more of an idea. I now understand viscerally, palpably that Shakti is not an idea; it's a reality. And Shakti is just what the ancient Indics call it. The Chinese call it Shi. In Kabbalistic Judaism, it's called the Shekinah, the feminine power of God that abides in the world and whispers to us if we're clever enough or smart enough to hear what she has to say, whether we gender it masculine or feminine. Um, this perhaps my favorite expression in English, although it has the most theological baggage, is what the Catholics call the Holy Spirit. What the Catholics are calling the Holy Spirit, however you gender it, is not dissimilar from what the ancient Indians are calling Shakti. And the Spirit abides in all beings, but there are those in whom it spends more time because they invite it and they cultivate it, and they have more capacity to receive and dispense it. And this has nothing to do with a religious tradition. This is beyond any particular religious tradition.
In that hymns, just one thing I wanted to add. In this hymns of Enheduanna, this 23rd century BC treasures that I fell in love with, there's a very interesting way how she puts it. She says, like, I cleansed my body, I did some ritual, and I prepared to receive a goddess. So she means that the goddess is not somewhere, it's not a statue, it's not something. The goddess is in you. You just have to be ready, and your body and soul have to be ready to give way to that energy inside you. That was quite
Yes.
powerful.
Yes, it's very, very powerful. And for Navaratri, for 9 nights, all of my students, maybe there's the odd student from an Indic or Hindu background. The vast majority of my students are in the Western world and from Western cultures. They are a variety of Christian, or I have Jewish students as well. They may be practicing or not practicing, but they for those interested in goddess and goddess practices, they will do some sort of practice or observance or fast during Navaratri, and they will palpably feel themselves being filled with what in modern parlance can be thought of as the Holy Spirit. And they feel it palpably. They feel like they're preparing. It's more when people understand that it's more than understanding. They have an experience. It's an experience of really outdated religious studies terms, like the holy or Eliades the sacred. But these men weren't fools. They weren't buffoons. They understood that there was much more going on that we can discern through microscopes and telescopes in the human experience. And this is the sacred. This is sacral power. And I
In
don't
this in
think
this
it's one.
aspect,
Please.
sorry, I interrupted you.
All good, please.
In this aspect, it's very interesting to look at it from the contemporary research of the altered states of consciousness. And in general, I mean, I don't mean to say that all religion is psychedelic experience, but there is this common space that both of those experiences share, and which is just more profound in the case of religious
And
experience,
and
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 not
and
induced by
and listen, that whether it's a religious experience or a psychedelic experience, I think the commonality is an altered state of consciousness.
exactly.
And to someone, to an individual who is used to altering their consciousness through religious paradigms or spiritual paradigms, they're fully aware that the frequency of waking consciousness is just one frequency. This material frequency of problem solving waking consciousness is one frequency. It's important. And scholarship and science is the arbiter of what is real in this realm. But this realm is not the only realm. And this is not the only frequency that the dials, the dial of our consciousness can tune into. And certainly that's not to say that all psychedelic experience is religiosity. Of course not. And that's not to say that all religiosity is tantamount to a psychedelic experience. Of course not. But I find it utterly fascinating that in ancient Vedic times, the earliest sort of, yeah, some of the earliest religiosity and religious hymns that are known to us to this day, they speak of a plant, a substance, a brew called soma that induced, if we take the text prima facie, what can be thought of as some sort of probably hallucinogenic state, a plant that was pressed that the ancient Vedic
Absolutely.
priests used for a ritual or religious or spiritual experience, I find that to be profound. Now, there are ways that don't require there are ways to perhaps get there that are free and free of trouble from the law, but nevertheless, there's a reason why people turn to
No, but it's
ayahuasca or what have
interesting
you.
because again, like chanting, like there is this book Soma Haoma Ayahuasca. I forgot the family name of the
Mm.
guy Matthew. I forgot his name, but it's a very interesting comparison of this states. And when we think about like chanting, like Icarus in South American tradition, and Vedas as something that was chanted, and a lot of other cultures have similar ideas that the sound actually is very crucial in this altering the consciousness. Not that it shouldn't be like only some substance, it's also the sound, this cosmic sound, divine sound, as Indian culture calls it. It's mind-blowing how this all is interconnected and interesting. And yes, it's not by any chance that some of those substances, sometimes called entheogens, like the substances that induce the feeling of God, divine. So it's quite interesting. It's of course very far from the party drug saying or from religion, because in religion there is also all those aspects that have nothing to do with spiritual experience. It's like as an institution, as a worldly institution, religion serves all kinds of other purposes rather than
Absolutely.
Holy Spirit.
I think of religion as the love child of the psycho-spiritual and the socio-political. And typically the socio-political all but eclipses the psycho-spiritual. What's ironic is the founders of religion are individuals deeply connected and having their profound experiences. And yet the traditions become so stringent that now, it's blasphemous to go off and have your own experience. All you have to do is believe in this guy's experience.
The
So
most mind-blowing situation is, for instance, the Ramakrishna order. Like the founder is basically a very, how to say it, mystical thinker, and let's say a very strange person, according to any standards. And then on this,
eccentric.
yeah, you can even say that maybe he had some schizoid like features in a good way, but on this like chaotic base, a very rational and very like Advaitic and philosophical order grows, and Vivekananda comes and preaches like absolutely different things. But I like this idea that you need some insanity in the core of the experience, some chaos for the even for rationality to be built and to exist, because otherwise without this heart of darkness, heart of chaos, nothing is going to live and pulsate.
Well, I think that chaos. I think there is destructive chaos, and there's sort of this creative chaos
This is the
from
divine
which all
mother,
things
this is Kali.
exactly. And also, this is what the water element is often emblematic of. When the god of Genesis moves over the face of the waters, these are the waters. These are the waters of chaos, the waters of fecundity. When the sun rises out of the cauldron of chaos for the first time in the Egyptian creation myth, for example, this is that it's chaotic from the perspective of order, from the perspective of, oh, I want to keep my world the way it is, from the perspective of status quo, it's disruptive. But in its own right, it has the power to create anything, right? So it's unpredictable. So it's fascinating. Um, I'm sure we could speak for hours, but I'm sure we should. I should be mindful of your time and also the time of our listeners. Is there anything else about the project or the book or anything else you want to share? Of course, there'll be a link to the book in the podcast notes. But anything else you'd like to share before we close today?
I just want to thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for inviting me, and thanks for listening, whoever listens to us.
You are most welcome. This is my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And I feel the same way. Um, this is my paycheck. This is my paycheck. I mean, I have no, obviously, there's no commercial relationship with this book, but this is the impact, the reverberations out into the world. the amelioration of people's lives, having people touched by these powerful ideas. This is my paycheck. I monetize a portion of my mission because I need to survive in these times. And sadhus don't work well in modern Western cultures. And also Toronto is an extraordinarily expensive city. But
Yeah.
my true paycheck, much like for you, is the impact that this has for people on the front lines, for people who might be grieving, for the people of Ukraine, for those who really are upset with our patriarchal world, for who knows what. So thank you for advancing this beautiful cause. And for those listening, we have been speaking with Dr. Alisa Lozhkina, who is a fine art historian and curator in her own right. She's also a fine artist because she has provided original, captivating art for her brand new translation in Ukrainian of the Glories of the Goddess. Until next time, keep listening, keep well, and keep contemplating the power of this feminine force that pervades all things. Take care.